Associate Professor of Global Structures and International Management at the University of New Mexico. And thank you, Annika. Sorry, I didn't give you much time there. Okay. University of New Mexico Anderson School of Management. Generally research global political economy and is concerned with how we make planetary a meaningful part of our social and economic realities, and has published work on issues ranging from international trade to creative economy. Both him and Thayne have created this. It's very hard to explain. So I'm gonna just let Dr. Montoya start out. He's gonna share his screen. We are so excited about this because we feel that this is a really new way to kind of break the ice in groups, a new way to just, join groups and get to know each other. And so with that, Dr. Montoya, if you want to start and maybe explain it a little better than I can, that would be amazing.
I too want to thank Senator Haggerty for leading this effort.
And you're on mute.
Manuel, you're muted.
Yeah.
Did he freeze? No, there you are. I see.
Oh, there you are.
Yeah, something happened there. I apologize. I think it kicked me off for just a moment. I'm going to share screen again, and if you can confirm for me that it's able to come up.
Sure.
Is it available?
Yep, looks great.
And we can hear you.
Great. Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I hope you're doing well. My name is Manuel Montoya, and I do teach at the University of New Mexico. One of the things that I'm very, very honored to share with you, and I want to thank Aaron, Vicky, and Maureen in particular for sharing your time with me.
Manuel, we lost your sound again.
He's frozen.
Oh. Manuel, maybe take your video off.
Oh, he's rejoining.
Okay.
Hello, can everybody hear me?
Okay, yes.
Goodness. I don't know if maybe it's the size of the presentation. I'm not sure, but I'm gonna do my best to
Maybe take your video off you and just do the screen share and see if that works better.
Sure thing. Okay. I think I'm going to need you to give me the ability to share screen again.
Oh, yep, you're right. Okay, hold on one second.
While you do that, though, I will describe this deck.
Yes, please do.
So I teach at the University of New Mexico, and I normally teach how we connect planetary scale issues like climate change, ethnic and regional violence, space exploration, all of the things that affect planet Earth generally. I connect that to economics and how we think of things as creatives, but also as people who are impacted or influenced by some of these planetary issues. And in teaching to business students, I have often found that it's very difficult to incorporate philosophy and to incorporate cultural theory and other types of big picture ideas while at the same time talking about business strategies. It just doesn't work. And I've done this for 10 years. And I found that one of the ways in which I'm a little bit weird or different at the business school is that I teach a lot of cultural theory. Often my students call me the squid professor, or call me the zombie professor, even before zombie shows like The Last of Us or even The Walking Dead started to become popular. That was my research. I would study how those things make us think about planet Earth in new and interesting ways. And so I often try to get students to think about things that have been, talked about in philosophy and in cultural academics for dozens, if not hundreds of years. And I use that inside of the classroom, but it doesn't stick. Sometimes we have a really good conversation, and about 2 hours into the conversation, everybody's very excited and very happy that we had a good conversation. And then when they leave the classroom, they forget everything that we talked about. And I get that. I used to get the response all of the time. So I decided, well, there has to be a way for us to make these kinds of concepts more material in the way that we discuss things. And that's why I invented this deck. And this deck for me is a representation of my career in studying cultural theory and studying literature and the arts and philosophy, and then connecting that to the more businessy or economic side of my career as well. I often joke, for those of you that know the 70s group, the Osmonds, I'm a little bit country and I'm a little bit rock and roll. I do a little bit of this and I do a little bit of that. And I tried to merge them together. And once I created the deck, students got it. It started to stick. This deck is 28 different cards that represent big picture ideas that are drawn from a number of perspectives from all over the world, both Western and Eastern philosophy, and questions that have dominated a lot of my own academic research. And they're all different lenses with which you can view a problem. And what's cool about that is you can take any number of these cards and you could have a conversation based on one card, or you can challenge yourself to think about a problem in a more complex way. And you can say, you can add 5 levels of depth, or you can add 20 levels of depth into a conversation that normally already has pre-prescribed preset discussion points that are already there. I've often found that this is actually useful also in a time when our politics is extreme, where some people are very embedded on one side of a discussion versus another. This is a way of breaking the ice and making an alternative way of looking at these sorts of cards. And I think that what's really exciting for me is that this has exploded into something that has been used in a number of ways. I have a couple of groups that use this deck in San Diego for Friday night movie reviews. And so there's this group that goes out to watch movies, and they then go home and they use the deck and they say, hey, let's think about the movie Dune. And how is the movie Dune about water scarcity? And so they use that question and they start to discuss the deck. I am going to explain in a couple of ways how the deck works over the next 10 minutes. And then I'm going to show you, hopefully, if the screen allows me to, I'm going to show you the cards and how several recent conversations have been used, both for entertainment, but also for very real and serious discussions that organizations are having. I'm going to start by opening up the screen here. Let's see if it works. And I can't see the chat. So if anybody has any questions that they want, feel free to unmute yourself and chime in.
I'll try and screen those for you as well. Your screen just popped off.
Yeah. I think what I'm going to do, it's a PowerPoint. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the PDF.
That's a great idea. Okay.
Yeah. The PDF is doesn't use as much memory. And so let's see if that works. Yes.
Yeah.
There we go. Excellent.
There we go. So this is a version of the deck online. And for those of you who want information, I've created, oh goodness.
I put your link in the chat.
Can you guys hear me okay?
We can hear you,
Yes.
but we can't see the slides.
You know what I'm going to do? I am going to send this to you, Vicky.
Okay.
And if you can bring it up, then
Perfect.
Okay. I just sent it to your email.
Okay. Give me just a second as it comes in.
Thank you, everybody. I apologize for that.
No worries.
The good old internet in the South Valley is not working as well as it should be.
As we always
Yeah.
say, tech is either your friend or your enemy. There's no in between.
I got back to Albuquerque and it's like there's enormous amounts of places where there's no connection for cell phone or I'm like, what's going on? It's kind of nice. Except for when you're trying to do a presentation.
Exactly. As the deck's coming up, I see a question here. Stuart mentions, are you planning to expand the subject matter of the card decks? Yes, over time we are. In fact, we're going to create a children's deck as well. So there's a bunch of different ways in which we're going to be creating content for a variety of ways of accessing this information. But for now, the reason we call it the blueprint deck is it's all the images on each of the cards are at least 100 years old. And so, for example, this one is the first card. It's called The First Human Power, which shows Hieronymus, which is the Garden of Earthly Delights. But every card has its own unique way of thinking about a problem. So you can take any number of cards to pick, for example, the Parliament of Trees. This card is card 18, and it's about what I call rural cosmopolitanism. And this card, every card has a prompt on the back, and it's a way of telling a story about the card. And it also has questions and keywords that you can use. And if you want, it also has suggestions for an exercise that you can do. So I'll read this card aloud to show you how this particular card works. So the Parliament of Trees card is, I'll just read the first vignette. People often think that to be cosmopolitan, you have to be urban. But the word cosmopolitan means person of the world. And what is that? And that does not exclusively mean from the city. While cities are an important part of making the world, a very powerful schism has occurred between city and country, one that has powerful political and economic implications. This card is intended to put the rural back into cosmopolitanism, to reflect on how the rural part of the world, a rich space filled with diverse living organisms and value, contributes to the making of the world. Use this card when you think a topic you're discussing needs to include a discussion of the importance of rural places and rural being. And so once you read that aloud to the group, you can then use take turns doing other things. So one of the questions in this is, why is world citizenship more often associated with urban spaces? Or how does the rural shape the world? And why do people think rural spaces are quote unquote quaint? So that's one way of looking at a problem. So if we're talking about climate change, and we're often thinking about, well, how do we address climate change or whatnot? This card can be used in a discussion to then talk about the role that the rural places play in the concept of climate change. Another really good one that's been used a lot recently in conversations that have the automaton, which is card 16. And this is about labor, work, and technology. So with ChatGPT, for example, and I actually just did a discussion with a local artist here in Albuquerque about artificial intelligence. What happens when we have certain things that we're used to doing as normal daily activities that we labor over? What happens when that becomes automated? And there's lots of different questions that are in this. But every single one of these has a variety of ways of looking at a problem. And the whole point is to also create an equitable environment where everybody feels like they have a chance to say something. I've been an educator for a long time, and I found that the smarty pants in the room often dominates and steals a lot of the air in the room with a lot of their wonderful conversations. And yes, they contribute great ideas, but there's normally somebody in the back of the room who feels like they had an idea, but they didn't get a chance to share it. By using the cards, I developed a method inside of the classroom called roundtable mode, where everybody has the opportunity to take a card, to draw it, and then it's their time to speak based on the card and based on the question that's at hand. I think that one of the ways, Vicky, if you can show the PDF now, I'll go through each of the cards, and just so you can survey what
I
the
don't
cards
have it yet, so.
Okay.
So just keep going like this, and as soon as it comes through, I will get it up there, okay?
Okay, that sounds good. So one of the other things that is really important to this conversation is the different ways in which these cards can be used. So for a couple of examples, I've recently, and I'm going to share with you in a moment, a record that I created with a group of space entrepreneurs. So these are all people in Albuquerque who are trying to develop a space economy. Albuquerque right now has become a hub for space entrepreneurship, small satellite and digital communications networks, and other types of work. And the organizer or the main coordinator for this asked me to bring the card deck to help these entrepreneurs think a little bit more about the political implications of what they're doing. Because the Air Force Research Lab and the coordinators of this felt like these entrepreneurs were not thinking about some of the bigger picture politics that were going on. For example, whoever controls space and how we mediate information is also going to control a lot of the fate of democracy and freedom of speech issues. And so we use the cards to break the ice and to get people to think about a problem in a way that they probably haven't thought before. And when Vicky gets the two files I sent, I'll share with you a record of how that conversation went. So the really cool thing about this is once you leave a conversation and everybody has a chance to do a round, you can then keep a record of this. And so then you can always go back and refer to how a conversation went at that specific time with the people who were involved. And over time, you can evolve your conversation based on any number of those things. So I mentioned before that a lot of these cards, thank you, Vic, appreciate that. So Vicky, if you can scroll through the cards slowly while I talk, those are the cards themselves are very straightforward. So they are designed to have a material knowledge and beauty and knowledge, making knowledge beautiful. So every single one of these cards actually has a lot of complexity to them, but they don't have to be too complex that it makes people feel like they're left out of a conversation. The most beautiful story I can tell you about this has to do with a class I taught during COVID. And I had these decks distributed to the students. And I had one student in particular who felt like he never liked seminars. He always felt like there was always kind of some sort of class issues going on where somebody who has a whole bunch of knowledge would dominate, and he would always feel intimidated about participating in really complex conversations. So I asked him to, whenever he was comfortable, Vicky, if you can go all the way to card 27, so you can scroll fast all the way down to card 27, which is the Revenant card. Each of these cards, in this prompt, the student that I'm referring to picked card 27, which is the card of decay, ugliness, and contempt. And what I really like about this card is that it actually asks some pretty compelling questions that this student hadn't really thought of before. His presentation that day was about gender equity issues. And the reason I didn't know why he had chosen it, but he felt really passionate about it. And one of the questions on the back is, why is decay of the flesh a fundamental human fear? And he read out the video for the he actually recorded a video for this, and he read, "We tend to hide things we think are ugly. Theologians and philosophers throughout history have connected morality with notions of purity. If cleanliness is godliness, then what does that tell us about filth? In extreme cases, people use filth as a way to provoke others. In the 19th century, a cult of the ugly emerged to challenge notions of purity and power. Punk rock is another version of this logic. One of the things we're sure of is that our bodies will eventually decay. We spend most of our lives denying this truth or concealing what happens when our bodies betray us. Use this card when you think a topic you're discussing has a tension between decay and beauty, or when the element of filth or ugliness is valorized." Now, he recorded this. He did his presentation via recording because he was on his way to the Mayo Clinic to get his final treatment for brain cancer. And he shared with everybody that he really wanted to have, and he wanted to complete his degree because he felt like that was an important thing that he wanted to do in his life. But he used this card to think about how our bodies sometimes fall apart, and sometimes they don't do what we ask them to do. And then he did this very beautiful and elegant discussion with his mother about the cosmetic industry. And he did this beautiful discussion about how we think certain bodies decay more than others. And he talked about gender issues and about how men and women are treated differently in terms of how the body, how our bodies are to be presented in public. And he then talked about the market for South Korean cosmetics. And he talked about gender equity issues there. It was beautiful. And it really did change for me. It was one of those moments where I said, okay, mic drop, and basically said the most beautiful thing that can be said at the time. And everybody started to add to the conversation using different layers of the conversation. In a month, I'll be flying to Minnesota to work with a hospital that is trying to recreate or re-envision their end-of-life policies. And it actually is largely due to their initial discussions about the deck. I have worked with the Mora High School students. So I'm from Mora, New Mexico. Many of you know that the fires were blazing there, the Calf Canyon and Hermit Peaks fire. And I went to the high school there and we pulled out the deck, and during a day-long period, the students used this card to play a game, and they all went around to talk about how they thought the fires had affected their lives, and got some pretty powerful perspectives about how kids are thinking about something as massive as these wildfires. So I have found that this conversation deck has been massively useful. And the way that it works really is it's in its simplicity. There's lots of ways to play it. And in fact, online, if you go to the website, there is a guidebook that helps you go through different methodologies. So one of the ways that I consider using it is using what I call roundtable method, where everybody has a chance to take a card and then use their turn to talk. But I often use challenge mode. So for example, somebody picks a card in the deck and challenges another person to think about a problem in a particular way. And that has actually yielded a couple of other things, and it gets really fun at that point. There's also random mode, where people pick a random card and people pick a random topic, and they try to see if they can have a discussion based on that topic to see how deep or meaningful it works. But if you do go through the website, each different part is exemplified. The other thing that I've done is we have a YouTube channel that you can tack onto that also describes the some of the conversations that I've had. I had a really good one with an agricultural worker that works for the for a local co-op here, and we were talking about New Mexico and colonialism, and we used the card deck to think about agriculture and colonialism. So there's a couple of really cool resources online where you can use this. I know that time is scarce. I don't want to take from Thayne, so I'm just happy to open up to questions what this is, and then if there's some time, I can show a copy of the conversation that I had with the space entrepreneurs.
So let's do questions at the end for both of you.
Okay.
For everyone on the call, we are going to go to till let's see, 11:30 Pacific time, so that we, if you have to go somewhere, we're going to get through the first two presentations first, and then we're going to open it up for questions, or if we want to try this. So we will move on to Thayne right now, Dr. Montoya, and then we'll circle back around for questions. Okay, so next we have Thayne Yazzie. He is an enrolled member of the Dene Navajo Nation. He was born and raised on the Navajo Reservation and has been a K-12 educator for Indigenous communities in both Washington and Arizona, particularly on the Lummi and Dene Navajo Reservation. Over the past several years, Thayne Yazzie has developed and implemented environmental education and outreach materials throughout Washington state. Thayne's mission is to create an awareness of environmental and Indigenous education by blending both science and art into an array of learning content that includes digital media, games, stories, and interactive designs. Thayne, welcome. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you. Hello. I just want to say first off that sometimes my microphone does like a looping thing where it just starts to get kind of weird and annoying. So just let me know, and then I'll just unmute it and then
Okay.
back in. We just love technology. I know.
Right, I know.
Okay, well, I'll go ahead and share my screen and we'll see how this works.
Perfect.
Uh, let's see.
Perfect.
Okay.
You just got to maximize it. There you go.
Oh, not doing this side. Let's see. Okay,
There
how's
we go.
this?
Perfect.
Full size and everything?
Yep. Looks great.
Okay, cool. So my presentation today is about a Salish Sea game. Again, my name is Thayne Yazzie, and I am from Bellingham, Washington. This is a photo of the bay up here in Bellingham. And over the past several years, I've been working on outreach materials and teaching about place-based science with a focus on indigenous knowledge and science and STEM as a whole. STEM being science, technology, engineering, and math. So this is just a map of the San Juan Islands. You can see Bellingham up there next to Bellingham Bay, and then there's Lummi Island. And during this time, as I was working at Northwest Indian College, where I developed a lot of these materials, I was the boat captain, and we would take samples throughout Bellingham Bay and then throughout most of these islands that you see. And so during this time, I would also create outreach activities for students. And a lot of the inspiration, of course, came from the place in the world around me. Here are just some examples of the activities we did. Do-it-yourself water filters. So students would create water filters from different materials they could find outside, such as rocks and sand. And we'd use charcoal, which has properties of pulling out, the bad things in the water. And we'd also do plankton nets. So you'd use nets to throw them into the water, and you collect little microorganisms, and then you can look under a microscope and see phytoplankton and zooplankton. We'd also do ocean acidification labs, raising salmon in the classroom, build your own rovers, and then, of course, just species identification, where we'd go out in our local areas and just look for animals and have these identification cards and just kind of try and learn and see what's in our own backyards. That was always the big goal with the outreach that I was doing, was just kind of getting students engulfed in their own place and their own environments. And many students, you'd be probably surprised, is that they actually weren't outside a lot of the times, or they'd be new on this beach, be like, oh, I've never been on this beach. So that was always really fun to be a part of that. Then one of my first tasks was to create a logo for the research lab out here. So here's kind of my thought process, and these are my illustrations. The goal was to create a logo that demonstrated, of course, the mission of science and research, but also including indigenous knowledge and indigenous art. The artwork is Coast Salish inspired, yet it doesn't really rely on any specific tribe. And that was a big goal of mine, because Northwest Indian College has students from all over the United States. And so I wanted to create something that was more contemporary, and that was more inclusive to folks from, different tribes and different cultural backgrounds. And so the artwork, I felt, was important in representing that. And so you can see the big symbol that's utilized here is the orca whale. And I wanted to kind of create something that had a whole food web within it. So I had different species, such as, phytoplankton and some shellfish. There's also some porpoises and crabs. And it just kind of goes in the image goes from left to right at the top, and then you can see the logo start to evolve down at the bottom into its final form. And so it was with this line of thinking that I started just drawing more and wanted to create something that was inclusive of art. And so I went ahead and started building these outreach materials. These are just like worksheets that you could get, and students would be tasked with drawing food webs. As you can see on the top left-hand corner, just different species in the Salish Sea. And then on the right-hand side, you can see a very similar workshop, but then with more of that, again, that Coast Salish line form style. And this was really important because a lot of marine food web education materials out there was, pretty universal, I guess. Like there would be sea turtles and things from all over the world. But my goal was, again, to really focus in on this place up here in the Pacific Northwest. So that's why all these species are here. And as this project kind of continued, I decided it'd be really good to include some of the Lummi language. And so I worked the Lummi language department up here, and they provided all the Lummi words, and our team started finding all the scientific names. And these cards here on the bottom are double-sided. So on one side, it's the drawing of the octopus, right? And then you flip it over, and then it's the Coast Salish design with the Lummi word. And so that was the first iteration of this card deck. And as time goes on, I started using this deck to have students draw their own animals and draw their own food webs. You can see the sun, the energy arrows going out towards the producers, and then just kind of gradually filling up with more species. Here's a screenshot of what my workspace looks like. This is an Illustrator file. You can see all the black cards right there, the Coast Salish design, and then the white background cards are all the animals. And then throughout the artboard, you can just see sort of a mess of just all kinds of design ideas. And yeah, most times, most of my projects look like this, just very messy, tons of layers, tons of things going on. And then the goal, of course, is to try to bring it back down and try to bring it back to Earth. So this here is just an image from Google, but it demonstrates this concept of the 4 directions. This is specifically a Navajo version of this, but there's different colors and different styles from different tribes. But the concept of the 4 directions is something that kind of grounds us. And as Dene and as Navajo, this is something that sort of build my just kind of my life around. The idea that the East is kind of the first place I start is just where the sun rises. And that's kind of where I get my mentality thinking about myself and my health, what I consume, what I eat, what I think about. And then the South is more of the general relationship with others and with people. The West being kind of more of that ancient knowledge, looking back on our ancestors and what they've kind of brought for us. And then the North being the goals and the things that, I want to accomplish in my life. And so what I got really excited was this idea of 4 directions. And then kind of bringing it back into the outreach I'm doing is then how do I kind of turn this into something that's gamified, but has the symbolism, but that's also universal and familiar. And so something that you probably all will recognize that also has elements of 4 different concepts is a deck of cards, which is also historically based off this idea of 4 directions. And that's why there's 4 different suits. And so when I kind of started making these connections with that, I thought it would be really easy for me to just sort of recreate a deck of cards and then just put animals in it. I also thought this would be valuable in an educational setting because there are numbers, and numbers, of course, are utilized for math. And that's just, there's so many games with cards that you can then kind of build off of. And my goal with these was to make very artful, colorful, have both the scientific drawing and the Coast Salish form, as you can see in the deck, behind those species. And you can see the back of the deck, it has sort of a sun design, and then it bursts out with all the different Coast Salish style with the phytoplankton, and then building sort of this little universe with all of the animals that are in the deck. And here's more of the animals laid out with their respective scientific names. And when you look closely, my goal was to try and still build a food web. So if you look at the 2s and 3s, most of the 2s are phytoplankton, they're producers. For the hearts deck or cards, you can see number 3 is an eelgrass. And then it just starts to move up the trophic level to then larvae, then we got a chitin, and then some krill, and it just sort of builds up till we get to the kings and queens, which are predators. The king in this case being a killer whale. Again, on the right-hand side, it just sort of builds up into this food web in regards to trophic levels. So that was my goal for the whole deck, was just trying to figure out how I was going to put all these animals together. And they don't line up perfectly, but it's just sort of something that I feel like students can kind of get a grasp on if they don't know what a food web or energy transfer is like, particularly. So the goal of this game, of course, is to teach about habitats. Players gain points, right, by identifying animals that live in ecosystems, including natural events, human impacts, and animal species. So the game I'm actually going to share with you right now is an expansion on the card deck. So there is a card deck like I have here, and you can, play with the cards as they are and kind of build your own games. But the goal that I've been working on recently is actually sort of expanding upon that. And so I'll just kind of show you a little bit of what that looks like. So here's your common food chain, right? We have the sun and the moon. I put them in the same category to a producer. And then we have our next level consumer, then to a predator. And of course, the food chain can extend, more species involved in this transmission of energy. So now we have salmon, and we have seals and orca whales and smaller fish. And as we can see now, the food web can get a lot more complex. There's a lot more species, different animals can eat other things. And if we look at social media in any way, we'll see even an octopus has captured an eagle in some videos. And so it just kind of demonstrates how a food web is just very complex. It's really just about survival. So that's kind of the things that I hope students get away from this, is that there's no real answer for how animals, obtain energy. Things just evolve and change over time. But the little guidance, we can at least help students understand also, habitat and what kind of species are generally found in a certain area. So this is an example of what one simple board would look like. And you'd have those cards, the deck of cards, and you would distribute them among your students. And then they would start trying to place them on the board, and they'd identify the names and the species and just complete this food web. So this is an eelgrass bed, and just what you might find in an eelgrass bed. And then you can talk about, why would a crab be there, or why would a salmon be in eelgrass? And so students might come up with, well, maybe it's, for food, or maybe it's for protection. And so you can just start to open up these conversations about habitats and the different food webs that you'd find within them. So I'll go ahead and just kind of jump through. There's a kelp forest, intertidal mud flats, and most of these are still a work in progress. So you'll probably see some unfinished designs here. We got our mountain river system, rocky shorelines, and then here's just the San Juan Islands as a whole. And so the goal would be able to split all those habitats up, and then students can break into groups, and they all share cards, and they're just, identifying these species while also making connections to habitats and just sort of a balanced ecosystem. Okay, so this is sort of a final project, in the sense that this is where students, we printed a bunch of these posters out and gave them to teachers, and so they can put them up in their classrooms. They're available for anybody who's interested. On the left-hand side, we have a list of all the common names and the scientific names. I apologize if you can't see it. This is meant to be blown up pretty big. It's a vector file, so it can be as big as you want it, and you won't lose resolution. And so all the species are listed. I think there's 52 total species here on this image. And then on the right-hand side, we have the Lummi language, the Chilangan, so all the words, and then the English translation there. And again, these translations were provided by the Lummi language department. And so I'm just super grateful for them for helping me with this project. And again, special thanks to Northwest Indian College, the CFC Research Center, Lummi Natural Resources, and Western Washington University. And if you look closely, I did have a map earlier in the presentation, but in the background of this is the map of the San Juan Islands. And so you can see, again, Bellingham Bay back there, Lummi Island, and then Puget Sound. And so the goal was to sort of just make this all-encompassing image just so it could be used as a reference. I'm also currently working on making it an infographic where you can move your mouse over the different images and it will show you how the energy transfer works with these particular species. Then you can, click on one like the bear and then get a little more information and also see what the bear would eat and what energy transfers to it. But that's a current work in progress. Yeah, thank you very much.
Wow. That's incredible as well. Okay, we have 8 minutes until our hour is up but we will stay on as long as we need to. So we will open it up for questions for both Thayne and Manuel. That was incredible, both of you. Very different, but equally impactful. If you have a question, just unmute. And Erin.
Awesome. That's so interesting. Both of these are really super amazing. Can you, both of you, and I'm going to have to hop off here to head back to a panel, but could you just talk about maybe one of the most interesting conversations or situations that you had while utilizing your card games?
Most interesting conversation that we've had. I would say actually
Appropriate conversation for here.
Well, I think one of the ones was after the movie Dune came out. I actually used this with a group of people, and that was one of the more interesting uses of it. There's a lot of creativity around that discussion, but it was mostly around water usage, and the discussion then became more about what is it about our discussion on water that isn't current, that we're not thinking about and that we're not talking about. And lots of really cool cards were used in ways that probably wouldn't. For example, the imperfect tapestry card, which is a card about flaws. We had an Army Corps of Engineer person discuss why, for example, we try to clean up or to create these barriers between water and the natural environment with which it operates, and why is it that we tend to do that, and we always do it to our detriment. And then somebody built right off of that and started talking about what is special about certain kinds of ways in which we consume water. It was a beautiful conversation, all using the movie as a way of talking about that. So I actually thought that was a really powerful and very accessible discussion that was happening. So it doesn't have to be about, something like really, really high order or high level to actually have a really good conversation.
Nice. Okay, Thayne.
Yeah, there's always fun conversations. I think my favorite are with younger students, and just once they start getting comfortable, with species names and different animals, they start to really kind of share their own knowledge that they have about things. And I always learn so much from them. So for example, a student once was like, hey, do you know why an orca is white on the bottom and black on the top? And at that moment, I honestly was kind of stumped. And they said, oh, it's because all the animals it's hunting are below it. And so when it looks up, the animal will see, the brightness from the sun. So it needs to be white. And then, of course, anything that's looking down, if the orca is below it, they see the darkness of the ocean below. And so just kind of, hearing from students is always really fun and fascinating. And they always have something to bring to the table. And so I think just having, just a game where they feel comfortable playing and seeing art, then they get inspired to also make art, and they draw all kinds of fun stuff and they're all excited about it. Just makes me feel good as an educator and as an artist, to see students really, take ownership of things like that. So yeah.
Wow, that's so interesting. Okay, any other questions? Okay, can folks
Yeah.
purchase your cards
Thank you.
Okay, so let me put the link to Thayne's in there too. I already did Manuel's. I will put it in the chat, and then when I send out notes, again, I will link this.
So can I ask a quick question? Thayne, so Manuel, you look like you're targeting mostly like college students and the adult, quasi-adult population. Thayne, are you using these cards predominantly with younger students? And then if so, what age?
We generally go from elementary all the way to high school and college.
Okay.
And with younger students, the games just change and become a little more simplified. So they become like Go Fish, is what we'll play, or just matching, and things like that, or grab a card and then draw the animal on it or something like that. And then with, as students, go up into higher grades, the games can become a little more complex and have more challenging conversations. And yeah, what I like about the project is that it can sort of mirror the group of folks that, that are engaging in it.
Thanks.
Nice. Yeah. Questions? Tracy.
So Thayne, are you thinking of going to other places and doing, basically it's a map of the ecosystem of biota. Is this your graduate degree or
This was just my project that I've been working on. I love to draw, and growing up I kind of liked more sci-fi things and things that were kind of weird and didn't really exist. And once I started working with the natural sciences, I started to just see a lot more of the beauty and the things that are there, and just the magic that is around us currently. So yes, I would love to do one of the Southwest, is where I'm originally from Arizona, and I would like to do kind of the style of the tribes down there and the species and the habitats there. That would be my next goal.
thank you.
Yeah, this would be incredible. Even like I'm from Cheyenne River Sioux, and the plains and the buffalo and the antelope, and just it would be really neat in almost any region. It would be interesting for these kids to be able to see that and how it plays out in nature and how that impacts them tribally or historically. So that's really cool.
And I wondered how long it took for each. Oh, sorry, Elaine.
Yeah, I was just saying, I think it could be cool too for, so like I'm in Reno right now. My students most of them haven't seen the ocean. So that card deck wouldn't necessarily be as meaningful because it's not place-based for them. But to use it as an example for students to create their own kind of card deck based on our own ecosystem, that way we're kind of, I really like it. I was very inspired.
I was just wondering how long it took both Manuel and Thayne to do these. Years, months.
My deck took around 2 years. And
Wow.
part of it was trying to find ways to make all of the concepts inside of this really accessible, because some of the concepts could be really out there. And so it took a lot of redrafting and then a lot of design elements to do that. And we wanted the cards to be really good. I'm talking about really thick, near waterproof, so that you can use them for a bunch of situations, and that students can throw them in their backpack, and you could have it for many years without it being a problem. So it was a lot of testing out the product to see if it was going to be a strong and reliable product. So that was the biggest part.
Thayne?
Yeah. Several years of first just drawing a bunch of line drawings, and then just collecting and keeping track of all of them, and then coloring them. Probably about 2 years just getting the art for it, and then about a year probably putting it together and then trying to conceptualize the whole picture and then getting them actually, produced and made into an actual deck. So, yeah.
So this is a question for both of you. Depending on your audience, do you start with the whole deck to see where the conversations go, or do you pull from your deck in order to start those conversations? Let's start with Manuel.
Yeah, thank you. It depends. I remember with the high school students, I laid out all the cards on the table and everybody just walked around. There was about 100 high school students, and we spent around 10 minutes just distributing cards and looking at them. And we didn't even begin with the back. We just said, which image do you like? What is the image that moves you and why? What does it make you think about? And then we introduced a question. And for that, we limited the number of cards that we had initially, and everybody took a card back, and then they had smaller discussions, and then we started building momentum off of that. So it depends on the size, but it also depends on the way people have been introduced. I have groups now that know the card decks pretty well, so they're just laying down all 28 cards and they're working with them quite a bit, but it's useful to start with a limited amount.
Before I go to Thayne, I have a follow-up question for you, Manuel. And I don't know if you'll know this, but have these cards been used for suicide prevention at all? It seems like yours hit on really deep issues.
I haven't seen it used for that specific topic, but I have seen it used for mental health stuff. So
Yeah.
actually my brother, who's a partner in this with me, he's actually going to be working with a local interfaith organization that wants to talk about serving youth mental health issues, and that's going to be something he's going to put on the YouTube channel pretty soon. He's pretty passionate about those issues.
Nice. Okay, Thayne.
Yeah, great question. I didn't show you the entire deck. In the deck, there are some additional cards, which kind of came from the fact that when I was printing them, it was like you could have a lot more cards, like probably like 8 more cards. And so I created a sun card, a moon card, and then 2 light cards. And so those were kind of my idea of having something that expanded on just the traditional playing set. So for conversation purposes, it's talking about things such as sunlight and, and tidal energy and how do those impact species. And so that will kind of, be a place that I might start with conversations with other students, just depending on what they're learning. And then one thing you didn't get to see either, which I thought was kind of my inside joke, but I thought was kind of fun, was the Joker cards, which were drawings of people, so as human beings. And I feel like that's kind of the important, conversation too, is like, how do we now play a part in this? Because that is inevitable. There's no really separating these animals into their own little bubble. Just everything from, noise pollution to, runoff from agriculture to everything that, these animals are living in their natural environment, we have impacted greatly. And, so those kind of conversations are really important, and they can, hopefully be utilized in a way that's productive with the cards. And you can, depending on what you pull out, you can kind of talk about them that way too. Yeah, hopefully that answers your question.
So, yeah, totally. So we are getting lots of comments about purchasing these and then possibly doing some sessions with students. So if I could get you both to put your emails in the chat, that would be outstanding. And then I have Manuel's, but Thayne, if you wouldn't mind sharing your deck with us so we could post it to our website. And then if you both, I know Manuel does, I don't know if you do, Thayne, but if you have a YouTube channel or any other, resources, put that in the chat so that I make sure and get that out to everyone. Not everyone could join us. We have more than 170 people on our distribution list, and I know a lot were very interested in this. So we definitely want to make sure and get that information out there. We will also put a recording of this to topic on our website as well. This is very interesting to tribes, I think, and Thayne being Navajo, and Manuel working with what you've done. This opens up a whole different form of communication that I think is probably really well received by tribal type members, which is what our group does, just because of the open nature of discussion. And it's not traditional. It's very outside the box. So I think this is awesome. Manuel, on yours, I still want to connect you. In the Plains, we have the Great Plains Tribal Chairman's Health Board that works with palliative care that I think would align really well with what you're doing with that hospital, which I think would be amazing. So, and then I know that it was said that like a lot of our tribes aren't near the ocean, but I think it's also so, I think it can be so impactful for, landlocked tribes to learn about the ocean and some of that too. So this has been great. Thank you guys both so much. Do we have any final questions?
Yeah, I just want to add something to Thayne. Thayne, I've already talked to incorporating some of these cards in the programs that we're doing with Native teachers here on the Flathead Reservation. And since many of them are Salish, your card deck on the Salish Sea is really appropriate, particularly this time of year, because this is when they start gearing up for the exchange of bison meat going west and salmon meat coming east to the reservation here. So we would really like to talk to you probably more about that and engage you in some of those discussions. And Ilea, if you're still on, maybe we can include that in some of the discussions at Earth Day.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Yeah, and we've talked about maybe bringing you both to our National Native Climate Summit,
Right.
and using this as like a icebreaker, and all the people that we're working with being exposed to this as a form of communication and that type of thing. So we will stay in touch for sure. And I've invited you both to these monthly meetings. I hope that if you have time, you will join us. This was definitely outside our box, but it was so amazing. We do focus on more of the producer climate issues. But if you both could join us, we would love that. And this was just amazing. Thank you both so much. So much work was put into those. Yes, thought-provoking. Tracy, I don't know when our National Tribal Climate Summit will be. We are working on that. Last year was our off year. This year we should do an in-person one. We are going to try and do a one-stop shop. So like one flight to Salt Lake or Denver or somewhere where we're not doing the connections. So more information on that coming. Stacy and I are working on getting that going. So with that, if there's no more questions, thank you both so much, Maureen.
Yeah, Vic, do you want to just give a rundown on what our
Yes.
calls are?
Yep. So in March on the 21st, we are going to do an ag climate review with Kyle Bukinski. He is going to do a recording because he's actually going to be on vacation. And then we will have one of his staff members on for questions. For those that don't know, he does the drought predicator and outlook.
Wildfire, drought.
Wildfire, outlook. Yep. And so we want to do that moving into spring, summer. April 18th, we are going to do adaptation and resilience to climate. We are going to have Josh Moore. He's from CRIT and his irrigation project that he is doing. And then in June, we're going to do the wildfire outlook. We're going to do that with Salish and then San Carlos. I don't know where Juan is. He was on here. I don't think he knows about that. Oh yeah, Juan. So I don't know if Juan, if Trent has talked to you about that yet, but that'll be in June. In July, August, we're going to reset and try and do some more summer specific topics. Maybe even breaking in July and August. We tend to lose people in July and August because of the producer nature of haying and all of that. September, we will do a year in review and looking at the winter again with Kyle and the Montana Climate Office. So we have lots of great things queued up. Juan, I'll be in touch if Trent hasn't for June. So we got lots going on and we're excited about it.
Thanks,
Any
guys.
other announcements? Okay, if not, everyone have a wonderful weekend or month. I'm used to these being on Fridays. Have a good week. If you're getting snow, don't get snowed in, and we will see you guys in March. Great to
Thank you.
see everyone. Thank you both so much, Thayne and Manuel. That was just amazing.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate you. Yes, thank you for